This is Love Notes, daily devotions from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Grace and peace to you. Our text today is Luke 15, verses 11 through 32. This is one of the more famous parts of the book of Luke. It is often called the parable of the prodigal son, although we don't understand what prodigal means so much anymore. In ancient literature, or even just a few centuries ago, prodigal meant someone who was kind of loose with their money. Now it gets confused with the word prodigy, and so it means that they're special. This is really a parable about the lost. Maybe we could call it the parable of the lost son, or better yet, the parable of the lost sons. After teaching the two parables about lost sheep and lost coins, Jesus then says, "There was a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the wealth that will belong to me.'" Now, this is a bold request, but we shouldn't, as is so often taught in this text, think that the son is wishing that his father is dead. It would not be uncommon in the age of Jesus for the younger son to ask for their share. A father can divide the estate at whatever time they wish, and it was sometimes often done to do that before the father died. We should also hear some reminders here of the biblical texts that come before this. A man had two sons, just like Abraham had two sons, Isaac and Ishmael, and the younger of them gets the blessing. There is Isaac, who has two sons, and one of them gets the blessing. Jacob, instead of Esau, is the younger. Tamar and Judah, same thing. Two sons, the younger gets the blessing. David and Bathsheba, they have two sons. The first dies, the second receives the blessing. So Jesus is recalling something from history. He's telling the people to remember the story that they come from. I don't think it's necessarily true that we should cast this young man as a scallywag, if you will, from the very get-go. It may be bold, it may be impudent, but it's not a sin to ask for his portion of the inheritance. So, we're told the rich man divides his assets between them. And a few days later, the young son gathered all he had and he traveled to a distant region. If there's any sin that he commits so far, it's this, that he leaves behind community and he goes outside the bounds of the people that know him. There, he squanders his wealth in dissolute living. There's no list of things that he does here. Later in the parable, his older brother will accuse him of using prostitutes. That may or may not be the case, but he doesn't do a very good job of managing it, and so he squanders everything that he has. This story is repeated generation after generation throughout human history. Young people who come into money and squander it all. When he had finally spent everything, a severe famine came on the land. A double-barreled kind of curse comes. He doesn't have any money, and now there is no food around, so the poor, well, they're the ones who bear the brunt of a famine, aren't they? So he went and he hired himself out. One of the citizens of that region took him in and sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. This is a little bit of humor here for a good Jewish boy. It's humiliating. It's a little bit funny. Maybe he gets his just desserts. A Jewish boy tending pigs. Well, there you go. And he looked at what he was feeding the pigs, the pods and the empty things. Pigs in ancient times were not fed the kind of quality food that they receive today. No, they received whatever the leftovers were. And so the boy looks at them and sees that he would gladly eat this just to fill his belly. And then the big sin that comes in here, it says no one gave him anything. He's in a distant land. Nobody knows him. He's far away from his people. He's squandered all his wealth. He's completely disconnected from everything, and no one has any compassion. No one does anything for him. And that wakes him up. He comes to his senses and he says, how many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? And here I'm dying of hunger. In other words, back home, the slaves and the servants have more to eat than I have. What am I doing here? So he decides on a plan. He's going to get up and go to his father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. I've wasted my inheritance. Treat me like one of your hired hands. This is a ploy. He's got an empty belly and he wants it filled up. Treat me better than they treat me here. So he set off to go to his father. While he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion and ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Apparently, like the owner of the sheep and the woman who swept the house for the coin, the father has been looking for the son along the horizon probably since he left, hoping that he'll return. He wants his lost son back. The son begins his speech, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But before he can say, make me one of your hired hands and feed me, he's cut off. The father says to the slaves, quickly bring out the robe, the best one, put it on him, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. In other words, clean him up, dress him up, restore him to his position, and get the fatted calf, the best calf that we have, kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he's found. There it is. He's lost and now he's found. So they began to celebrate. But not everyone celebrated. Remember, Jesus is telling this to people who, with Pharisees and scribes present, have been judging that he shouldn't be welcoming the people he welcomes. So now he's set this story up, and we are introduced to the people who represent the Pharisees and the scribes. The elder son comes in from the field, and he came and approached the house. He heard the music and the dancing. He hears the celebration going on. He calls to one of the slaves, and he says, what's going on? Well, the slave says, your brother has come home. Your father has killed the fatted calf. He's got him back safe and sound, so everybody's having a party. So what does the oldest son do? What does the one who was always found do? He becomes angry and refuses to go in. Now his father comes and looks for him. Now who's lost? He began to plead with him, which can also be translated comfort him. But the son answered his father, listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you. I've never disobeyed your command, yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. Here's an interesting thing. The son would have received his share of the inheritance when the father divided the estate as well, and yet he's never taken advantage of it. He's been waiting around for the father to give him what he already has. I never even got a goat from you to have it with my friends. Well, you own the goat. But when this son of yours, hear the distance in the language, he's your son, he's not my brother, came back, this one who devoured your assets with prostitutes, makes it worse than it really is, you killed the fatted calf for him. And then the father said to him, son. He claims him as his son. You are always with me. and all that is mine is yours. I've given you everything. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead, and now he's been raised. He was lost, and now he's been found. Did you notice that this brother of yours, not this son of mine, but this brother of yours has come to life? He was lost, and now he's found. Jesus looks at the Pharisees and scribes who are criticizing him and says, these brothers and sisters of yours who you call sinners and tax collectors, they've been found, even though they were lost. Why will you not celebrate? We are all lost. We're either lost out squandering our lives and separating ourselves from God, who then waits and looks and searches, or we're right in God's presence, grumbling over the fact that God calls us to be the children of God. In either case, we're lost. And Jesus has come to find us, to bring us home, and to gather us at his table. Amen.